Okay, guys, let me tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't mess around, but I love to gamble. Whether it's on cards or on horses or the NFL, if the Pope is going to get married and the odds are right, I'll gamble on that too. But we've got 3 CFL games coming up this week, and let's talk about them. Number 1, Saskatchewan and Edmonton. When is the bubble going to burst for Saskatchewan? They've gone 12 years without making the playoffs. They're already 3-0 this year. Last week, they had 3 players make the CFL Stars of the Week. Their defense is awesome, 24 sacks in 3 games. This team is hot. The last time they played Edmonton, they beat Edmonton 26-15 this season. But they're going into Edmonton. And Edmonton is awfully tough at home. We've got the revenge factor to consider. We've got the grass to consider. The way I see this game, it's going to boil down between a kicking game, Dave Ridgway against Jerry Corrick. A lot closer than you think. I'm taking Saskatchewan minus 3.5 points. Next game, Calgary into Hamilton. Well, which Hamilton team is going to show up? This is a Jekyll and Hyde team. When you expect them to win, they lose. When you expect them to lose, they win. Now, these 2 teams met just last weekend, 45-20, Hamilton in a blowout. Calgary, where are they? Already this year, they're 0-3. Hamilton is 2-1. And, you know, Hamilton won for only the 2nd time in McMahon Stadium since 1979 last weekend. Now they're going to come home, and after last week's blowout, you think it's going to be another blowout, right? Could be right. I'm picking Hamilton, 10.5 points. And our 3rd game of the week, British Columbia at Winnipeg. Well, hasn't Winnipeg been having its problems? You know they've been having their problems both on and off the field. They lose Reeves, they lose Clemens, they lose Boyd. They're unhappy because of their contract shtick. And this BC team, I'll tell you, Matt Dunnigan for BC is going to quarterback them right all the way, I kind of think. Anyway, British Columbia, 11 points. And that's how I see the CFL this week. When picking the CFL this week, what you have to consider are the teams that know how to stay cool under pressure, just like us. Let's talk about the 3 games this week. As it's going to be hot right across Canada, keep the coolness under mind. Saskatchewan and Edmonton is our first game. What has happened to Saskatchewan? Unbelievable. 3-0 so far this year. Haven't made the playoffs in 12 years. This team has really come alive. 3 players were the CFL Stars of the Week. 24 sacks in 3 games. But they're going to Edmonton. Even though Damon Allen isn't playing for Edmonton, that's a key. The factor here is the revenge factor, and Edmonton is tough on their own grass. It's going to boil down to a kicking game between Jerry Corrick and Dave Ridgway. I am picking Saskatchewan 3.5 points. Next game up, Calgary and Hamilton. Last weekend, Hamilton beat Calgary 45-20. And they traded after the game Flagel for Ford. I think Flagel is going to be better with Hamilton than Ford is going to be with Calgary. The motivation in Hamilton's win last week was it was only their first win at McMahon Stadium since 1979. But Hamilton is a Jekyll or a Hyde. You don't know which team is going to show up. But they should show up this game. And I'm picking Hamilton by 10.5 points. Final game to talk about, British Columbia heading to Winnipeg. Winnipeg has had all kinds of problems. Their record 1-2. They lost Reeves, they lost Clements, they lost Boyd. They've got salary problems off the field. On the field, off the field, they've got problems. It's not going to be easy. British Columbia coming into Winnipeg with a 2-1 record. Dunnigan has just been sensational for British Columbia. He's going to actually be the difference in this game. I give the edge in every category to British Columbia. In the earlier game, British Columbia beat Winnipeg 36-3. They won 5 in a row out at the stadium there. But this game, I see British Columbia being a favorite by 11 points. So, you know what I said, keep in mind, you know how to keep cool, because that's what I know how to do. Keep cool. It missed me. Okay, guys, this week we have Edmonton Eskimos 3-1 going into the Hamilton Tiger Cats 2-2. Now, Edmonton last week gave notice that they certainly are going to defend their Grey Cup championship as they knock off the previously undefeated Saskatchewan Roughriders 43-27. The story in this game, Tracy Ham, the quarterback, he goes 21 for 32 pass completions, including 3 touchdown passes to Jim Sandusky, who ultimately ends up as the CFL Offensive Star of the Week. Edmonton is back. They're the team to beat in the West. Now, Hamilton, they gave notice too. They're 2-2. The notice they gave is gee, don't expect us to win, even when we play a team like Calgary who's 0-3. Don't expect us to win. When we're expected to lose, maybe you might consider us. So that's what Hamilton is saying. Interesting stat, if Hamilton is the favorite at home, they will not win. So, for all you guys in Hamilton, I'm not making them the favorite at home. I'm making Edmonton the favorite by 3.5 points. That means Hamilton should win, right? Wrong. Take Edmonton. They'll still cover the 3.5. The other game, Ottawa at Winnipeg. Ottawa 0-4. Winnipeg is 2-2. In this game, the story is Ottawa's coach, Bob Weber, before the last game said, not going to make any changes. I want you guys to go on out there, score points for me. And Ottawa did. They scored him 7 points. Trouble is, Toronto scored 41 points. This week there will be changes, but it still isn't going to help against the Blue Bombers. In this game, the Blue Bombers are back. They upset British Columbia in their last game. Roy DeWalt, doesn't matter whether he'll be there or Mickey will be quarterbacking this team. They both can move this team. This one is going to be 14.5 points for Winnipeg. Take Winnipeg to cover. This one should be a laugher. Okay, guys, 3 games to talk about this week in the CFL. First game's got British Columbia 2-3, going into Ottawa 1-4. Now, this is their first meeting of the year. I guess you could call this the Battle of the Cellar Dwellers. Hard to imagine. British Columbia last week was the leading offensive team in the CFL, but they lose to Toronto. Matt Dunnigan had 4 interceptions. The team had 8 turnovers. Should point out, though, Dunnigan never plays well against Toronto. On the other hand, Ottawa wins its first game of the year with a balanced attack. Bob Weber finally gets the monkey off his back as they beat Winnipeg 28-17. But I should point out, Winnipeg stunk out the stadium. So don't break out the champagne yet, Ottawa, for your second win. I'm picking British Columbia to cover 6 points. Next game up, Winnipeg 2-3, going into Edmonton 3-2. Both teams coming in off of losses. Of course, the Winnipeg story, penalties, 17 penalties, stupid penalties for 142 yards. Coach Riley, after the game, said it was complete self-destruction. Now, Edmonton, on the other hand, they were mildly upset in Hamilton. One Hamilton Tiger Cat called it the ugliest game in CFL history. Edmonton's offensive line did not show up. They left them back in Edmonton. Maybe it was the humidity, but they're going back to Edmonton now, where they always like to play. So in this game, I'm picking Edmonton to cover 3.5 points. And the final game of the week, Calgary and Saskatchewan. Calgary 2-3, Saskatchewan 3-2. The last time they met, just a little over a week ago, Calgary won in an upset. What an upset, 48-10. Calgary's Rick Warman, 10 for 17, 227 yards. Calgary put up a defensive brick wall on their front line. They did not allow a single point in the second half. Big game for Calgary in this one. Saskatchewan, on the other hand, have lost their last 2 after winning their first 3, but those 2 that they lost were on the road. This is a team that likes to win at home, and they will again. Saskatchewan will cover 4 points. Okay, guys, great performance last week. We're set to do it again. 4 games to talk about. First game is Winnipeg at Calgary. Both teams are 2-4. It's their first meeting of the year. Now, a couple weeks ago, Winnipeg was hurt by the penalty. So last week they say, okay, guys, no penalties. So they concentrated, no penalties, and Tracy Ham ran all over them. 46-21 win for Edmonton over Winnipeg. Now, Calgary, on the other hand, really playing well. Last week, they lost a last-minute heartbreaker to Saskatchewan, 24-21. But the key here is that Winnipeg has played 3 times on the road this year. 3 times they have lost. I'm picking Calgary to cover 3 points. Next game up, Edmonton 4-2, going into British Columbia 3-3, first meeting of the year. Edmonton, an impressive win, as we said, over Winnipeg, 46-21. Rookie quarterback Tracy Ham, 130 yards of offense for him, was the offensive player in the CFL last week, and he can go hot and cold too, you know. A couple weeks ago, he threw for 6 interceptions. Edmonton looking, though, to stay first in the West. British Columbia, on the other hand, unimpressive win over Ottawa, 24-12. Quarterback Matt Dunnigan called it an ugly win, but I'll take it. Larry Donovan, the coach, called Dunnigan gutsy kind of guy, right? And British Columbia's CFL Defensive Player of the Week, Jeff Braswell, he'll be ready this week. Now, the key in this game, twice Edmonton has won big at home, then gone out on the road and lost. So I'm picking British Columbia by 4 points, and they'll cover. Now, Toronto, 5-1. Going into Saskatchewan, 4-2. It's their first meeting. Toronto beat Hamilton last week, 19-5. Toronto had strong defense, but John Kangemi, the quarterback, says, I want to be electrifying too. But so far, the offense has been sputtering. In their last 3 games, the papers have called the games against Ottawa, British Columbia, and Hamilton sloppy. Now, as far as Saskatchewan is concerned, last week a 24-21 win over Calgary. They were lucky to win the game. Austin came in for Burgess at the last minute, and he throws a touchdown. So I'm picking Toronto by 6, and they will cover. And finally, Ottawa, 1-5, going into Hamilton, 3-3. Last week, British Columbia beat Ottawa 27-20. And Ottawa's starting to show signs now. And I don't want to point any fingers on the Ottawa team, but Tom Dixon missed 3 short field goals that could have won it for Ottawa. Hamilton, on the other hand, they lost to Toronto 19-5 in a sloppy game, as we told you about. Mike Kerrigan, 3 games in a row now, hasn't been able to finish off at quarterback, as Tom Porras has had to come in for him. I'm picking the Ticats by 10.5 points, but I think Ottawa will cover. Okay, ready, guys? 1, 2, hop! Just got a couple of my friends here to help me so I can get into the mood with 4 games that we're picking. First game is Winnipeg at Calgary. Both teams are 2-4. It's their first meeting of the year. Now, a couple weeks ago, Winnipeg ran into problems with the penalties. So the defense got together, said, guys, no penalties. Let's concentrate, no penalties. So while they're concentrating on not giving any penalties, what happens? Tracy Ham runs all over them with Edmonton in a 46-21 victory. Calgary, on the other hand, really playing well. They lose a heartbreaker last weekend to Saskatchewan, 24-21 in the last minute. Key here is that Winnipeg has played 3 times on the road, 3 times they have lost. I am picking Calgary by 3. Okay. Next game up, Edmonton at British Columbia. Edmonton 4-2, British Columbia 3-3. Edmonton, an impressive win, 46-21 over Winnipeg. Rookie quarterback Tracy Ham became the CFL Offensive Player of the Week, running for 130 yards. But he's been hot and he's been cold too. A couple weeks ago he threw 6 pass interceptions. Edmonton looking to stay number 1 in the West. British Columbia, on the other hand, unimpressive in their victory over Ottawa, 24-12. Quarterback Matt Dunnigan says, it was an ugly win, but I'll take it. British Columbia also sports a CFL Defensive Player of the Week in Jeff Braswell. Now the key here, twice Edmonton has won big at home, and twice they've lost their next start. So in this game, I'm picking British Columbia by 4, and they'll cover.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Now, ready for the next one. Here we go. Toronto is taking on Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan. Toronto 5-1, Saskatchewan 4-2. Their first meeting. Toronto wins their last game 19-5 over Hamilton. Toronto quarterback John Kangemi wants to electrify everybody with his offense. But the offense has been anything but electrifying. In fact, in the last 3 games, the offense has been sloppy. That's right. Now, the Saskatchewan team, they beat Calgary 24-21. They were lucky to win this game. They brought in a quarterback to replace Burgess. That was Austin in the last minute. He throws a TD. But I'll tell you, in this game, I've got to go with Toronto by 6 points. And finally, Ottawa 1-5, going into Hamilton 3-3. Now, Ottawa in their last game lost to British Columbia 27-20. Ottawa is really starting to show some signs. I don't want to point any fingers, but Tom Dixon missed 3 field goals. Not just 3 field goals, 3 short field goals. Thanks, Shorty. Okay, now Hamilton, on the other hand, lost to Toronto by a score of 19-5 in a sloppy game. Mike Kerrigan, for the 3rd game in a row, did not finish out at quarterback. So in this game, I am picking Hamilton by 10 points. Too short to get up there, right? Now, will Hamilton cover 10.5? Take Ottawa. Okay, guys, week 8 in the CFL, 4 games to talk about. First game is Saskatchewan at Winnipeg. Now, last week, Saskatchewan coach John Gregory blew it. He had a 17-0 lead over Toronto. He takes out quarterback Kent Austin, brings in Tom Burgess. Saskatchewan loses. Toronto wins 23-21. Now, I'm not going to say that Burgess isn't good, but when you got a hot quarterback, go with the hot quarterback. And I'll tell you, the bright spot for Saskatchewan was Joe Fuller. 3 interceptions. This guy should have been the CFL Defensive Player of the Week. That honor goes to Doug Landry, but Joe Fuller, terrific. In this game, though, I am taking Saskatchewan by 6, and they'll cover. Game 2, Calgary at Toronto. Here it is. Calgary will have the lead with 2 minutes to go and lose the game. That's how they've lost their last couple games. They lost in the last 2 minutes. You know who you blame for that? You blame the defense, in particular the defensive line. These guys should have been pressuring the offensive quarterback. They didn't do it. You're going to see some changes in the defense this week, but it still isn't going to help. Toronto, on the other hand, finally, Gil Renfro gets a kick in the seat where he needs it. He was benched at the beginning of the game. They bring in John Kangemi. He doesn't do good. In comes Renfro. Looks like $1 million. Toronto wins. And now I'm picking Toronto to cover 7.5 points over Calgary. Next game up, we've got Edmonton at home to British Columbia. Remember what I said last week? When Edmonton wins big at home, then goes on the road, they'll lose. And that's what happened last week. British Columbia beat them 28-10. Now they're going home. We've got the revenge factor. We've got the fact that Edmonton has not lost all year at home. Plus, these teams are battling for first place in the West. Revenge factor, very important. I'm picking Edmonton this week by 4 points, and they'll cover. Next game, Hamilton at Ottawa. Leaf, what was that you were saying about Hamilton couldn't score 20 points? How about 51 points? And Mike Kerrigan, CFL Offensive Player of the Week, Ticats by 8, and you'll see 100 points in 2 games. Well, the inside maintenance and clerical workers are on strike at Canada Post right across the country. We thought they'd have lots of time on their hands to help us with our CFL picks this week. Here we go. First game, Saskatchewan at Winnipeg. Last week, Saskatchewan coach John Gregory really blew it. He had a 17-0 lead over Toronto. What's he do? He takes out quarterback Ken Austin. He brings in Tom Burgess, and Saskatchewan loses the game. That's a coach's error. Now, as far as Saskatchewan is concerned, Joe Fuller, 3 interceptions. He should have been the CFL Defensive Player of the Week. So this week, in my pick between Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, Saskatchewan by 6, and they will cover. Next game, Calgary at Toronto. Here it is. Calgary will be leading with 2 minutes left in the game. Toronto will win the game. That is how Calgary has lost their last 2 games. You know who's to blame? The defense, the defensive line. No pressure on the quarterback. You got to get the pressure. On the other hand, Toronto was lucky to win their game. But you know what? Gil Renfro finally got a kick in the behind. They sat him out at the beginning of the game, and then Toronto got down. They brought him in. He looked terrific. So this week, my pick between Toronto and Calgary, the Argos by 7.5, and they will cover. Next game up, back in line. Here we go. British Columbia at Edmonton. They played last week. They're going to play again this week. Edmonton, remember what I said? When they win big at home, they go on the road, they lose. That's what happened. BC beat them 28-10. This week, they're back at home. They haven't lost all year at home. The revenge factor between Edmonton now and British Columbia. Edmonton by 4, and they will cover. Final game of the week, Hamilton and Ottawa, another rematch. Last week, Hamilton wins this game 51-24. Mike Kerrigan was the CFL Offensive Player of the Week. I think you're going to see the same kind of thing. You may see Hamilton get 100 points in 2 games. So between Hamilton and Ottawa, my pick, the Ticats by 8 points. That's it. Well, guys, it's Olympic week, so this is our Olympic CFL report. So I've got to do something athletic. Ready? Here we go. We'll start off with British Columbia at Calgary. Now, the first time these 2 teams met, British Columbia won 44-31. They lost last week at home, but they seem to be better on the road. So this week, I am picking British Columbia 2.5, and they will cover on the road. Next up, Winnipeg at Ottawa. The good news for Ottawa is that the only game that they've won this year has been against Winnipeg. They beat them at Winnipeg Stadium 28-17. Winnipeg will be a little ticked off on this one, even though Winnipeg is going to be 4-point favorites. I kind of think Ottawa will get their 2nd win of the year. Edmonton at Toronto. Edmonton 8-3, Toronto 7-4. Preview of the Grey Cup last week? I think so. Edmonton, of course, undefeated at home. Toronto has a sputtering offense, but when they go to Toronto, Toronto's the favorite by 2.5. You think the revenge factor is in play? I don't think so. Edmonton's going to cover and win the game. Finally, Hamilton at Saskatchewan. They couldn't have met at a better time. Both teams are 7-4. Hamilton had trouble beating Ottawa. Saskatchewan upset British Columbia at BC Place. Ken Austin, I love him. In this game, it's a pick 'em, and I'm picking Saskatchewan. What's this? Oh, that's my score. Last week in the CFL, my picks really stunk. 4 picks, and they all lost. Something is really fishy in the CFL. Combine that with the big story of the week in Point Barrow, Alaska, and I thought I should come to the fish store to do my selections this week. Thank you, Alan. You hold on to that. Our first, and we got some fish to help us. Who's our first fish?
Mr. Bass.
Mr. Bass is going to help us right here. We're going to talk about Hamilton and Ottawa, two teams really that don't have to worry about winning or losing. Ottawa is out of it, showed some signs last week, but in this one, what do you say, Mr. Bass? Well, I think Hamilton is favored by 8 and he will cover. Thank you, Mr. Bass. Okay, we'll put him over there. Next up is the Edmonton, British Columbia game. Edmonton should have won at home. Who's helping us here?
Mr. Whitefish.
Mr. Whitefish. Here he is. Mr. Whitefish. He's alive. Edmonton and British Columbia last week. Edmonton should have won at home. They didn't, but they will win this week because it's an important game. If they win, don't forget they're going for the bye in the playoffs. So, Mr. Whitefish, what do you say here? Well, British Columbia is on top, favored by 2.5, but Edmonton will cover. Mr. Whitefish says Edmonton will cover. Whoa! Who's our next little helper we have over here?
Mr. Trout.
Mr. Trout. Whoa! Look at Mr. Trout here. He's going to talk to us about Saskatchewan and Calgary. Calgary going absolutely nowhere. They lose last week to Ottawa, the worst team in the league. Saskatchewan needs this to stay first with Edmonton in the West. So, Mr. Trout, what do you say? Well, I'm picking Saskatchewan by 6, and they will cover. Thank you, Mr. Trout. There he goes. And our final game of the week, we've got who?
Mr. Pickerel.
Oh, Mr. Pickerel. Look at this guy. Oh, he's still alive. Mr. Pickerel is going to tell us about Toronto and Winnipeg. Now, these two teams, number 1 met number 2 last week. Toronto came out on top. What are you saying? Well, I'm picking Toronto favored by 5, but Winnipeg will cover. And who's going to argue with him? Just remember High's slogan, if it swims, it's at High's.